Welcome to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Jodie.
And I'm Matthew.
How are you doing today, Matthew?
I am doing pretty good. Nothing really crazy happening with me right now, but how are you doing?
I'm doing phenomenal. Taylor Swift owns all of her work. So
Yeah,
I'm
congrats.
doing great. Thank you. It was a group effort. I went to two concerts. I bought so much merch. I feel like an investor.
Good. You can be a partial owner with Taylor, um,
That's
in your mind at least, and that's what matters.
that's what matters. I feel we now, as long as, men don't own it, we're fine.
Sure, sure.
But speaking of men, this week we watched a movie called The Man from Earth. Ooh.
I love our transitions. We try so hard to have the seamless transition from "How are you doing?" to "This is what we're talking about." And we use men as the transition point, and that's a fun one. But no, this is I think your husband is the one that put us onto this film because I'd never heard of it before this.
This is one of Connor's favorite movies. It's up there with The Princess Bride and Lilo and Stitch. So in great company. Um,
Sure, I, I
but
just
he's
read I just read The Princess Bride like 2 weeks ago, so
have you seen it?
of course I've seen it. It's a
Okay.
great movie, great book. But
Yep.
but yeah,
I I didn't
I can't
realize
speak.
the book.
I can't speak for it's based on it, but the whole premise of the movie is that it's based on a book. This is beside the point. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. The
Yes.
whole thing is that it's the guy reading the book to his kid in the movie. And like while there's like a part of that happens in the book as well, that's like the whole movie's thing. It's like, hey, we're just reading the good parts of the book, which is what the book is about. The book says, hey, the author is like pretending that he's abridging a different book to just have all the good parts. This isn't the Princess Bride episode. This isn't the Religious Treehouse reviews the Princess Bride. This is the Religious Treehouse reviews The Man from Earth, and here we are. Um, but yeah, what are your initial thoughts on this? I suppose.
Okay, so the first time I saw this movie, and it opens up with just this man walking into a cabin. He's got these friends with him, and I looked at Connor and I said, "I'm sorry, does this entire movie just take place in one cabin?" I think we're 30 minutes into the episode by this point, and he said yes. And I was like, this is the worst thing I have ever seen. This is, what do you mean they don't change locations? What do you mean it's just a lot of talking? But about the second or third time I saw it, I sat down, I actually listened to what they were saying, and I was like, oh, you know, these could be insightful conversations. I'm saying could now because I believe Matthew has a list of inaccuracies and things he would like to note. But for someone who maybe not maybe for someone who definitely wasn't taking a lot of time to think about the context in which we live, it was very profound to me. So I think this could be a good starter movie for people to think a little more.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, I suppose. I think this, and I think this is a good spot to do our general overview thoughts, and then we'll talk about the specifics of what goes on later. This felt to me, and I don't want to. I feel like being such a grumpy Gus about what I'm going to say, so I apologize to all the people that love this movie because I think there's like a cult following to this movie.
Yeah.
But it felt to me like some dude had a little mind altering substances and was like, "What happened if there's a 14,000-year-old dude?"
Yeah.
And then just kind of like wrote about it. And then he kind of got sober, and then he said, "Okay, can we make this make a little more sense?" And none of it was based on accuracy. Like that wasn't a concern. This is science fiction. Like this is very intentionally science fiction. But it was just it felt like some like 21-year-old graduate or graduation project in film school trying to be like, first of all, it was very low budget, very cheap camera work and bad lighting and not very good acting. But Oh, we'll talk about that later, I suppose. But the writing, it was just as if they didn't do any research other than looking at a few message boards online about anthropology.
Okay. No, there are points I agreed with you. There are points I did not.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that I did definitely concur with this movie feeling a little bit like you said, like someone took some psychedelics,
Yeah.
had a thought, followed through,
Mhm.
and then made a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not to say that it was bad. Like I think as a method of storytelling, as a method of talking, I was captivated. I was interested the whole time. Like if you explain it as a movie where there's just a group of people talking in a cabin for an hour and a half, that can sound really boring. But the methodologies used of storytelling of this pseudo debate type situation happening, it was really interesting and compelling as a way to present the message. It's just that none of the message was researched well enough for my liking.
No, and that was the hard part of showing this movie that's supposed to be based on the conversations between a bunch of academics to
Mm.
an academic, because like what they're trying to portray might be just casual conversation to you, and you're able to pick out some things that like the layperson wouldn't know.
No, it's and a lot of the professors were in the sciences and stuff, so I'm not exactly versed in that, but it definitely did feel like someone who'd never really been in academia imagine what is it that professors talk about in their free time, and they're like not really knowing what that looks like.
No, it's a crazy kind of movie. Are we ready to get into the specifics?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so we open up. The Professor Oldman is moving and leaving. He's been at the school for 10 years, and his colleagues were like, "Hey, we are trying to throw you a party. Now we're at this cabin in the woods," which I too would be a little perturbed. Like, we're trying to throw you a party, man. Why are we at this cabin in the woods? But he was like, let's just casual hang. I'm packing up. I'm leaving."
Yeah, I will say the aspect of professors just hanging out and chatting with some like alcohol, that's accurate. I'll give full points to that. That I saw nothing wrong. Oh, this is a party. This is exactly what I would enjoy at a party. So full points on that part.
Yeah. And so we have Professor, I don't remember all of the professors' names, but we got a woman in, was she in biology? No, there was a man in biology. There was a lot happening.
No, the sarcastic jokester guy was the
Mm,
biologist. I don't
yes.
remember what the Christian literalist. I don't remember what her profession was.
No, you watch this movie, it makes maybe more sense, maybe less sense. Um, but one of the professors does, in fact, bring one of his students to the cabin. And I was like, ooh, gross, but accurate.
Yeah, not accurate with any professors that I know, but sure.
Well, I think
Stereotypically accurate.
this is also filmed in the, was it early 2000s?
I think it was 2007 it came out.
Yeah. So there is just that trope of like the
Yeah.
close student and the professor. Anyways, moving on,
Yeah.
they they start talking, they're conversing, and Professor Oldman's like, well, what if there was a caveman who lived over 1,000 years, who lived so long that he had been able to see all of history, not see all of history happening, but been able to experience chunks of history from his point of view. And he's now alive now and is able to examine them. The like, because he was alive during all of the history that happened, but the history he experienced was only what was in his view.
Yeah. And we very conveniently get a lot of very big points of history that he was part of. Very conveniently.
Yeah. So let's talk through some of those, because that basically feels like the movie. Like the setup is it's a bunch of professors talking to each other.
Yeah. Thinking that this guy's crazy because he's claiming to be 14,000 years old and he's just telling his story of what's going on. And it's very, very monotone. Like he's not like trying to convince them or anything. It's just like hey, here's the story. Here's what we're talking about. Um, and like they try to give authority to this. At one point, the biologist says, I guess anything's possible. And that's like trying to give credence to the audience. Like, just imagine, like, believe him. And that's like what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And I lost my train of thought. I don't know where it went. Oh my God, it went to Timbuktu. But I think what I was going to say is that the audience also doesn't know. The audience doesn't know if he's trying to pull a prank on them or if he's being genuine. So, like,
Yeah. I think
it's very up in the air.
I think the premise of the movie is like winking at the audience, like we're supposed to believe them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But you're never quite sure until the end. Because in the
sure.
beginning, the way they draw you in is like you're also questioning, like, is this dude crazy? Is he about to pull out a gun and kill everyone? Or
I never once considered that, but okay.
I maybe just watched too many movies.
Sure. Oh,
Because a gun does get pulled out.
yeah,
So
which unnecessary, but that's beside the point.
is it? Well, how would different people react in that situation? If you're like standing near someone claiming to be 14,000 years old, how are you going to react? And they touch on that. They're like, would he be taken in by people with lab coats
Yeah.
testing on him? Like, what would that look like? I know it seems like the premise of a frat boy, but I love it. But
You know,
here are some.
it's as if a college student trying to write a movie like watched a couple Doctor Who episodes and was like, I can talk about this.
I think the movie would be really good without the net. If things were accurate.
Well, yeah, I mean it's science fiction, so like accuracy, like we're supposed to step away from nitpicking all the details and try to embrace the fiction of it. But yeah,
But that's not why it was brought to the altar of our
that's
podcast.
that's not why we're talking about
That's not what we're actually talking about the inaccuracies,
it.
believe it or not. But here's some things that they bring up that he was friends with Van Gogh.
Yeah, yeah,
How do we
and
feel about that?
that upset me more than any of the bad religious information because first of all, his whole premise is like, I travel light. I'm selling all my stuff here. I don't need all of this, but I'm keeping a Van Gogh. Like the idea that he was gifted an original Van Gogh by Van Gogh himself. And then at the time of Van Gogh, when Van Gogh was not worth anything, he kept it. And then it's like, oh, this is my one true thing that I'm holding for 200 years. I just felt irrational to me. I'm too much of a fan of like art history. And like Van Gogh at that point, like it was not respected by anyone, like his friends or anything like that. I don't know. That upset me as a fan of art history.
I think Da Vinci would have been better. They'd been like he was friends with Da Vinci and had something from him. Because at least then you would have been like, oh yeah, of course he held something of Da Vinci's, but Van Gogh, really?
I don't know. I don't know. That was just I'm pretty sure what happened there was the director was like, I really like Van Gogh. What if we include him in here? I don't. Again, that's just me being snarky.
I don't think it's snarky though, because that's true. Because I mean, a lot of artists, their work only becomes worth something after their death, I believe, is the common saying.
Sure, it becomes worth more,
Becomes worth more.
but
I
I don't think the value in art is in its worth. It's in its cultural value, and I don't think Van Gogh had any cultural value or influence. And there's no reason that he would keep that as a sentimental item as opposed to any other things in his 14,000-year-old life.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. 14,000 years is a long time, and 200 years feels like a blink of an eye in comparison. So like maybe he picked it up and he just keeps taking it. He's
Maybe,
like,
who
this is
knows?
my one knickknack.
Maybe he was just a really big fan of Van Gogh. Like after he died, he's like, "Oh, I didn't know I still had this around. I guess I'll keep it now that he's a cool dude."
Yeah,
We'll go with that.
yeah,
This again has nothing to do with what we actually want to talk about. So let's move on
absolutely
from
not.
Van Gogh.
Yeah, no. Okay. Should we just get into so the movie goes on for like a good half to two-thirds talking about these things, but the last chunk is the meat of what we want to talk about because they start discussing biblical times. And had this man been around during any of these biblical things that happened? And he,
Yeah.
I don't know how I want to say that.
No, the first half of the movie is spent talking about prehistory, like how could this guy like have lived, like just go looking at it from or trying to look at it from a bunch of different angles, saying how would this guy live for 14,000 years. And then the second half of the movie, for the most part, with a few detours, kind of focuses on, well, are you religious? What is religion to you being 14,000 years old? And given that that's what we're talking about here, I suppose that's where we're going to focus all of our conversation on. And this is where we'll really get to all the spoilers. Is it comes out to be that this guy John Oldman was actually Jesus. So he has lots of comments on Christianity and a surprising amount of comments on Buddhism and a lot of just general religion comments that goes on for half an hour. So where do you want to start with that?
Um, the name John, how it got to Jesus, I thought that was a fun story. I don't know if that could even be described as accurate.
I I remember he went through a bunch of different names saying how it went to Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't have off the top of my head how the name John relates to Jesus, but when in doubt, a name is probably related to John. Like John is like the OG name that all things somehow magically transform from. So I want to say I could be way off here, but I want to say things as far away as like Barbara are somehow related to John. Uh,
Oh, wow.
and that might be a false example, but there are some examples of like names that have nothing to do with John whatsoever, have some long lineage connected to John. So that's a fun little factoid, fun little tidbit. That one could be true. I don't know. I didn't look into it.
So this one's a maybe,
Maybe.
maybe. Then they talk about the fact that he was taking Buddhist teachings
Yeah,
and spreading them.
right. And this is where it's just all science fiction part because he says that he learned under the Buddha, which, okay, cool. He did that, lived in India. Also, this is a white dude the whole time. That's never addressed. That this is just a white dude living in Middle East, Asia, all over the world. And that's never addressed. That's never something of any concern. He very much looks like someone that would be cast as Jesus in modern, and we talked about this in our Jesus Christ Superstar episode, is like, okay, this guy thought, well, we need to cast a Jesus, and this is how we have our white guy with blue eyes and brown hair. But there's this weird obsession that I feel like the writer has and director has with trying to conflate Buddhism with Christianity, where he really wants to say, well, Christianity is just Buddhism, but we're a little upset at the Roman Empire and we've kind of like advanced Buddhism a little bit. And that's all that Christianity is. That's all the New Testament is. And that's just wildly inaccurate. Like there are maybe one or two scholars out there that are respected that think that Buddhism might have had a little bit of influence on Jesus, but by and large, scholars tend to agree that Buddhism had no influence on biblical writings whatsoever. And it is just weird that we're pushing this viewpoint. I think a lot of times when we talk about these things in our past episodes, our critiques are towards more literalist interpretations of the Bible and Christianity. But what we have in this movie is kind of the opposite side, the kind of anti-religious, the kind of atheist critiques on Christianity that are based on a very different set of misunderstandings and conspiracy theories. That's all we have here. And for some reason, was it Jerome Bixby? He hyperfixated on some conspiracy theory that said Christianity is a result of Buddhism.
Okay. Well, yeah, no. And did that in conflating two things together, two religions. saying how similar they are without looking
Yeah.
at their differences is what we try to not do.
Yeah, and that's not to say that there aren't similarities between um, the Bible and Buddhism. In fact, it's fairly common um, for Jews to be fairly interested in Buddhism because there's a lot that overlaps, and we even get terms such as Jubu or Buju, where people practice Buddhism and Judaism, depending on the which one they see as more first. That depends on their name, how they might identify themselves. But like there is this ability to combine Buddhism and Judaism that that exists, but that's a much later innovation. That wasn't Jesus. Jesus was not Buddhist.
Jesus was not the trendsetter for that.
No.
No. Okay. They also pull in paganism,
Uh-huh.
and I know we have some feelings about
Yeah.
paganism influencing the Bible and the myth of Jesus and who he was.
Yeah. What are you focusing in on there?
I'm not really focusing on anything. That was more of a Connor note about it. I mean, you know me, I kind of vibe with the whole Christians stole this from the pagans
Yeah.
conversation. Come Christmas time, I was a menace.
Yeah.
Saturnalia was a
No,
pagan day.
no, no. We had an episode about this, about how Christmas was not stealing from Roman and Greek ideologies. Like, no, no. But yeah, so first off, the notion of pagan, I did bring this up. Pagan generally refers to coming from a Christian. If you're a Christian, mention something pagan. It's usually a pejorative term of some sort, saying like, oh, those pagans who believe in other gods and all that. So when we use the term pagan, we're trying to refer more so to um, Roman practice, Greek practice, that type of thing.
Got it.
And I think it's important to denote the difference between how it's used pejoratively and not. So it's not my favorite word, but there is this other idea that the writer and director kind of push that Jesus was based on Hercules at one point. Is that one of the claims that they made?
Yeah,
Hercules and Krishna, I think.
that was my next one.
Yeah. Okay. So this comes from, I think originally, I think his name is Jordan Maxwell, who in the 80s ish came out with a book saying like there are 16 savior figures before Jesus that were all, born in a manger, had a crown of thorns on their head, uh, yada yada yada, all these different things that lined up with Jesus, and all of these other, pagan deities, savior figures also had all of these features. None of that is true. That's all a complete fabrication. Like he has a list of however many attributes that Jesus had that all these other people have, and none of them have more than two, maybe maximum similarities. And it's this idea that we get that says the whole Jesus myth is just stolen from past, creation narratives, other narratives like that. And that's just the conspiracy theory that's pushed by more atheist religious views. So at some point, way down the line, because they're awful movies, we'll have to watch what Bill Meyer. What was his movie? Religulous, whatever that's called. So he's big into like don't don't fall for this Christianity stuff. It's all stolen from earlier things, and it's all conspiracy theories, and it's all wrong. Zeitgeist is another one that is very popular among people who don't like religion, and it's based primarily on conspiracy theories. And the reason that these conspiracy theories catch on is because oftentimes they have this kernel of truth that if you latch onto and squint your eyes and shake it around a little bit, you might think that it kind of makes sense. And you're like, okay, cool. But if you look at it with any degree of, you know, criticism or just not blindly believing whatever you're told, it's clearly just some conspiracy theory fabrication.
Okay.
But no, Jesus was not Hercules.
But it'd give him more street cred if he was. Um, Oh, is Moses based on Mysis? I think we touched on this.
I don't think we did, but I don't know of anything that says that. That
Okay.
seems to be another conspiracy theory being pushed. While Moses is a Egyptian name, and he arose from Egyptian influences, being in that area, I don't know of anything being related or stolen from Mysis. If he did, there's probably a similarly related story that might have one or two similarities. That doesn't mean it was stolen or taken right from that. Um, and so again, it's just this conflation of looking at two different things from vaguely the same time period. And what these conspiracy theories mean by vaguely the same time period mean about 1,000 years apart. um that they can kind of like conflate into like that's about the same with a lot of squinting, and it just doesn't work out academically.
I'm starting to feel they should have had more people conferenced in on the script writing.
Yeah.
The apostles weren't really apostles because they didn't teach. This wasn't like a huge thing that he said, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I think that one was more him ad-libbing of being
Yeah.
like, well, I was actually Jesus, and Peter learned a little bit about how to fish more, but he didn't really go out and teach like I told him to. Like, I don't know what point they were trying to push across there. Like the ideas of like we have like it makes sense that like we know Paul the apostle, um, and he was in arguments with James and Peter about how to teach these types of things. I don't know what point he was trying to get across there. But about that time, he also came up with that the three wise men at Jesus' birth was stolen from Buddhism, which again, while there may have been wise men at Buddha's birth, doesn't mean that we've just plucked different religious ideas and plugged them into a different religious system. It's just they really got excited by saying, "Oh, that's Buddhism. Oh, that's Christianity. It kind of tastes the same. It kind of has the same smell. They must just be the exact same
Okay, but the three wise men thing, I have heard. I have heard in serious conversation. I have heard this before. Like, it's not just from this movie. So,
Right.
like, they were bringing up things that maybe you're like, I don't know if they're bringing up commonly known misconceptions and making fun of it. I kind of doubt that.
No, I don't think they were making fun of it. This seemed to be
Genuine.
the more atheist sided religious conspiracy theories, saying like, oh, we can discredit all of these religions because they're all just conflations and other different religions put it into a blender and spit something else
Yeah.
out that's new.
Some quotes that we have. Piety is not what the lessons bring to people, it's the mistakes they bring to the lessons. That felt profound.
Was that John trying to explain Christianity?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like like maybe there's some good messages that are being pushed here. Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying I disagree with the messages per se,
Yeah.
just with the rationale behind them.
Which is my next quote. Fairy tales build churches.
Yeah. um, and you can see what I mean by these are atheist conspiracy theories.
It's certainly a movie. I honestly I didn't know. Like, is there like a section of movies that are just like these are atheist movies? I didn't know that was
Yeah.
a thing.
Well, I don't know if it's this big thing, but I mean, most famously, I mentioned we have Zeitgeist and we have Bill Myers, religulous. I don't know how to pronounce it. But those are like the big famous ones that like get thrown around in a lot of anti-religious circles.
Mm,
And I've never seen either of them fully. I've just seen a bunch of clips here and there.
yeah.
But no, generally you can ignore what all of those things have to say.
That so okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think the thing that upset me the most, the line that I most disagreed with
Mhm.
was when John Oldman, said, "The Old Testament sells fear and guilt. And the New Testament is a good code of ethics put in my mouth by poets and philosophers." And that was that as an Old Testament Hebrew Bible scholar, that was very much like wrong, because that very much goes into the idea that, oh, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, Jews who follow the Old Testament and Hebrew Bible are messed up people that don't understand what the Bible actually meant. They don't actually understand God, and it results in anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, and it's just not even accurate. Like the fear and guilt that you may find in the Old Testament is very present in the New Testament if you find that. And the good code of ethics found in the New Testament is likewise found in the Old Testament. Like, just because there's different genres and different ways of understanding the text and not researching the text at all, and you just have this preconceived notion that the Old Testament is bad and God is angry, doesn't make it true and doesn't make it what's actually part of the text. So that came across as very much the author, the writer and director, not having any idea about biblical text and biblical understanding, uh, uh, and it just felt way off and a little bit anti-Jewish.
Be down to see this movie done again because I do think it's a premise that has merit. Like
Yeah.
the idea of someone, because oh, you're gonna hate me. My brain immediately went, he's not Jesus, he's Cain. He's Cain and he hasn't died because no one can kill him because then they'll be punished sevenfold.
Yeah. And that would be that okay, that would be an interesting premise. I'll give you points for that. I would watch that. I'd probably disagree with a lot of it, but I'd still watch it.
I'm just thinking you make it Cain. He can be Jesus. He can even be Moses. He could be all of the male biblical figures that you
True.
want, but maybe take out the Buddha stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe let's take that out. Maybe let's take out Van Gogh and base the premise on him being Cain, one of the first men. And I'm there.
Sure.
Give me that. I could see that. I'd watch that movie.
Yeah. No, and we essentially have that in John Steinbeck's East of Eden,
Yep.
which is honestly one of the best books of all time. So, and I think I haven't seen the movie, but I'm pretty sure they made a movie of it as well.
Wait,
So,
really?
oh my goodness, we should do that on one episode.
Do that.
Wow, that's exciting. Get ready. Send us, write in the comments or email us about how much you want to hear us talk about East of Eden, the movie. Uh,
And if you haven't read the book, read it. It's so good.
so good.
So good.
Um, that never even clicked in my head of something that we could watch. That's exciting.
And
But
we'll
but
watch the
no.
sequel to this.
What?
We'll watch the sequel to this. The
They have
Man
a
from Earth.
sequel to this?
There's a sequel.
How do they make a sequel of this?
I don't know. Because this dude moves every 10 years. Okay, wait.
Yeah.
Let's back to the movie real quick. So he moves every 10 years. And like they ask him at one point, have you had wives? Have you had children? Things like that. Earlier on in the movie, before they get to the religion, this guy who studies psychology comes in
Mhm.
and he turns on John Oldman and almost shoots him because he's like, you're crazy. He's also had just lost his wife the previous day. And this is
Yeah.
the craziest part of the movie that I don't think we were even going to touch on. Anyways, the psychologist comes back later after everyone else has left. It's just John Oldman, his like the woman who's in love with him the entire movie because they had to get a little romance in there. And it's it's revealed that John Oldman is the psychology professor's father
Yeah.
and that he had left him and his mother. And then the professor dies.
Yeah. Has a heart attack. Um, yeah, I did appreciate how they presented the psychiatrist. whose wife just died. I think they showed his grief and trauma that he was experiencing at the moment very well and very interestingly.
Yeah.
Having just experienced the death of his wife and then being introduced to this guy who can't die or who hasn't died in 14,000 years, and looking at that from a perspective of trauma and grief, I think they did very well and was very interesting. Um, and and I think that is kind of how it transitioned into the religious talk, because a lot of what he was concerned about, the question of why, how could you be doing this, is a lot of what religions tend to be trying to answer. So by putting his grief, you know, preceding religion, I think was very interesting and also very indicative of how this writer views religion. He views religion as this way to answer questions of why and how, and to find some appeasement there, through the grief and the trauma. And in doing that, I feel like it's kind of reductionist in what religion is. But on the other hand, it also highlights one of the benefits and good things of religion, that provides comfort and answers to the man in grief, to the Christian literalist that just needs some form of answer to go on with her day. So like it did good and interesting things in that regard.
Storytelling, I thought it was very well done.
Yeah.
Facts, maybe not so great. Good puns because the main character's name is John Old Man.
Yeah, very creative there.
Very creative, very fun, very funny. To me, it was very interesting that the only people who walked away believing his story were the young graduate student, the woman that was in love with him, and then the older black gentleman who I think believed him but didn't want to talk and mess around with that stuff.
Yeah.
And it all felt very true to those characters.
Yeah, I also thought it was very interesting that the Christian lady, who most certainly didn't believe him, gave him a kiss on the cheek at the end. I think that was an intentional parallel to Judas kissing Jesus, um, at the end of Jesus's life. So that was a fun choice that I think they made.
I I think it's a fun movie to watch. Maybe get some popcorn. Don't base all of your thoughts around it. But if the movie gets you to think and makes you wonder, and you do more research and you uncover, oh, these things aren't inaccurate. I mean, these things are inaccurate.
Yeah.
Then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, but I think there's plenty of movies out there that can make you think, that can make you wonder, that don't rest primarily on false information.
Yeah, but this is one of Connor's favorite movies and he edits our videos. I'm trying to be nice, Matthew. We're going to lose our editor.
Yeah, for if you edit videos, if you're someone who edits people's videos for podcasts, I think this is the perfect movie for you, and 100% you should, love this movie. Um,
Everyone
and
else.
yeah, but everyone else,
No, I see why he likes this movie though.
mm,
Because all right. Well, any more thoughts? Comments,
no,
concerns?
not in particular. I think we should continue our question for every episode. Do you see this as a religious movie or a movie that depicts religion?
I think this is a movie that depicts a really weird Jesus.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's about where it ends for me. Because like I even had this moment. I texted you. I was like, I'm not sure I picked a good one. This actually isn't a religious movie. I forgot. I just know it talks about religion at some point.
yeah.
So that's where I'm at. What do you think?
I would almost argue that this is a religious movie, in the
Really?
sense that it because there is this cult following to it that adores the movie and have used, talking points from this, as we've seen from Zeitgeist and Religulous, that kind of takes this as gospel, to use a pun, and says this is what religion is, this anti-religion religion. And so I don't think it's actually religious in that sense, but I think it's much more religious than Jesus Christ Superstar that we just watched. Um, I think there's something there in the pop cultureification of religion that there might be something to think about here. Um, but I could be wrong. Who knows?
Who knows? But thank you for joining us this week at the Religious Treehouse. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Bluesky. Email us. Facebook. Trying to
wherever,
think.
wherever you get your podcast or your social media, we're probably there.
We're there, buddy. Leave a comment down below. Send us an email. Um, Follow us on TikTok, really. I think we're fun, but
Yeah, we have fun on TikTok.
we have fun on TikTok. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.